Welcome back everybody. In this episode we fit up some budget PS4x4 powder coated steel heavy duty side steps. Now a few people showed some curiosity in these, so let's go over them, but more importantly see how well these fit up. So this video was going to be a two-part where I was going to replace the wheel stud here and install these side steps. I pulled all this apart, got to a point and went, you know what, I'm under the pump, I haven't got enough time. So this is going to the shop on Friday to get that done. It's a good idea if you put new wheels and tyres on any vehicle to get a wheel alignment done as well. So I'm going to get the wheel alignment done. They can replace the stud while it's in there and it'll be all good to go. So moving on to today's topic, the PS4x4 side steps. What are my initial thoughts? Well, to be honest, not too bad. I mean, given these are $500, which is pretty cheap in today's standards, they're a mass-produced item. I'm assuming they're fabricated over in China, and they are what they are really. Now, looking at the underside of these steps, it's essentially a tubular construction. It's a lighter weight tube than you would have on a typical rock slider, obviously. The welds themselves around the mounting plates that run in between really are pretty tidy. They're not too bad at all. There's not a huge amount of splatter on these bars around all the welding points, and they're finished off reasonably well. So from a finish point of view, they're not too bad. On the top side, you've got this nice checker plate sort of cover that's tack welded on, and that's where if you want to be really picky, the weld has eaten away the edge of the plate when it's been welded on. These are obviously heavy duty side steps, they're not rock sliders. So they'll give you a degree of protection, but really for the most part, it's more of an aesthetic upgrade. They'll provide some limited protection, but you don't want to be taking it down and crunching it on things because they will bow up and buckle. But I would imagine that these really will be slightly stronger than an aluminium side step or the plastic clad steel side steps that come standard on the Pajero. Weight wise, these are a little bit heavier than the standard side steps, but there's not that much difference. Now where there is an advantage is that they're slightly shorter, which I'll show you once they're installed. So if you're looking at some really tight wheel clearance, because you've upgraded the wheels and tyres like I've done here, it provides a little bit more clearance, particularly on the front. Now back underneath, and noting these are side steps, the primary difference other than the gauge of the steel being used is that the mounting brackets do sit down from the underside of the boards, similar to how the factory Pajero ones are done and how all your aluminium side step ones are done. So you will have some protrusions running through which will get hung up and caught if you're trying to do some real gnarly stuff. So that's one thing to bear in mind. To fit the side steps up to the vehicle, PS4x4 provide these pretty neatly finished off brackets, and they're labelled right and left to make the install a little bit easier. To be honest, I've got no issue with these brackets. They're finished off extremely well, they're CNC cut and they're folded up and extremely neat. You'll notice that 2 brackets per side just have 2 slots, and then there's another one with 2 slots and a hole. This one goes into the middle, which you'll see when you go to install it. They also provide the hardware to fit the steps onto the vehicle, and it consists mainly of M8 bolts, hole power washers and spring washers, and then standard nuts. Now when you remove the side steps off the vehicle, you'll notice that Mitsubishi from factory use M10 bolts, and they've got captive nuts that go into the brackets for the side steps. Now PS4x4 seem to suggest that you're going to use the smaller M8 bolts to mount not only the brackets onto the vehicle, but also the steps onto the brackets. I think that's fine to mount the steps onto the brackets. However, I am going to upgrade to nylock nuts just to make it a little bit more secure, particularly on badly corrugated roads and vibrations, just to make sure they don't rattle loose, because I don't particularly trust standard nuts and spring washers all that much, particularly on a 4-wheel drive. Now noting the M10 bolts on the Pajero, I'm also upgrading the mounting hardware to M10 bolts with nylock nuts. Now I've got new bolts as well because we couldn't quite match up the thread of the factory bolts to the nuts that are at the specialty hardware store. So we're just replacing like for like M10 bolts with matching nylocks just to make the mounting connection a little bit more secure. The first thing I do is remove the front mud flap. It makes for better clearance with your larger wheels and tyres anyhow. There's 3 M10 screws or nuts that fix this on. And then inside the wheel arch, there's this little bracket which holds the inside fixing of the mud flap. Simply take out the 10mm bolt, remove this, and that just makes sure it doesn't get caught up or foul on your wheels and tyres because it's no longer necessary and the mud flap isn't protecting the tyre from hitting it. Now underneath you'll see the brackets which come down and hold the steel reinforcement for the factory side steps. This is the front of the vehicle, so up here we have two 14mm bolts which you rattle out from the rear side, and then there's a 14mm bolt which comes out from the bottom. When we get to the middle bracket here, you'll find a 12mm bolt on the rear and a 12mm nut up above. Now that goes onto a stud which secures a step in when you pull the rear bolts out and make sure it doesn't fall down. So it's good to have that stud there. It just keeps everything all nice and tidy when you pull it apart. And then there's also a 12mm bolt on the inside here that you want to pull out as well. And on the rear bracket, you obviously have the 14mm on the underside here. There's a 14mm in behind here, and that's facing the front of the vehicle. And then also a 14mm, which is pretty easy to see, that you access again from the front side of the vehicle into the bracket. Then it's a simple case of just sliding the step forward to release it off the stud and dropping it down. Now it's time to put the brackets on. So place your brackets where they need to go on. We'll do the rear bracket first, and obviously it goes on like this, down onto the board. Put your washers on, and then I'm using a nylock nut to more securely fasten it onto the step itself. So put all three brackets on, leave them loose so you can adjust it up, and then we'll tighten it all up once it's mounted into the vehicle. Now they also provide these plastic end caps that go into the tube. My suggestion is you pop these on with a rubber mallet before you install the steps, because it's a lot easier when it's off the vehicle because you've got the clearance to tap it on. Now as you can see with the brackets loosely on, the finish on these is pretty good. I'm not disappointed at all, particularly for the money that I paid for them. A few little marks here and there, you're not going to be crying or anything like that. I think these are pretty good. Once you see them on the vehicle, they're not bad at all. So I've got the steps flipped over now. Just put a towel on the trolley jack just so you don't mark all the coating on the underside of the step. Then it's a simple case of just sliding it in, slowly lifting it up into position, and then popping a few bolts through to secure it in, and then you can make all your final adjustments. Now one thing I am doing here, working from the front to the back, is I'm putting the bolts in the other way around. The factory has them with the thread pointing towards the front of the vehicle, so you find they get bound up and caked with a lot of mud. Because we're changing the hardware around, I think facing them backwards is the smarter thing to do, and it works perfectly fine. So I'll put these in, adjust it all, and then button it all up, and we'll be done. And the steps are roughly into place. Just a bit of an update. You can use the factory Mitsubishi bolts onto the back brackets because they've already got captive nuts welded onto the bracket. And then I'm using the new M10 bolts in the center and the front because they don't have captive nuts in them. So now it's a case of just getting it all into position. You want it all nicely level and straight and true with the vehicle. The brackets that come with the PS4x4 kit have some really decent slots in them. So there's a lot of adjustment that you can make to get it sitting either up really tight into the vehicle if that's what you want. And that's probably what I'll do. I'll try to pull it up as tight as I can and pull it in as far as I can and get it all adjusted nicey nice. So we'll do that quickly now and then I'll show you how it all looks.
A few moments later.
And it's done. It was an incredibly easy install actually. Everything lined up as it should. It all adjusted pretty good. I might make a few adjustments down the track, but to be honest, it just went up, under, bolted in and off you go. I think the biggest recommendation would be to upgrade the hardware just to make your life a little bit easier, make it a little bit more sturdy, but not bad. Look, for $500, I think you really can't go wrong. Obviously, they're not going to provide the protection that rock sliders do, but they don't come out nearly as far as I thought they might. They tuck up nice and neat, and I think it's a really, really good budget compromise to, again, up the appearance of the vehicle, but provide that little bit of extra protection that the plastic side steps don't give you. You just have to remember that these are still steps, so you've still got the bracketry that hangs down, as opposed to rock sliders where it's all tucked up a lot tighter underneath. Now from a sturdiness point of view, they don't really move. The vehicle's moving around more than the actual steps And with it outside, I think it's looking pretty good. The new wheels, these steps, it just completely changes the look of the vehicle, and more importantly, it's going to help us a little bit off-road, and it's still practical. So I think it's money well spent. Well, I'm running late to pick Michelle and the boys up to take them to soccer training. Sorry, Michelle, but I hope you enjoyed this. It's just another thing we get up to behind the scenes. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as I always say, get out there, stay safe, and have fun. Catch you next time.